Alright, welcome back to It's Not a Sport, Season 2, Episode 25. So I skipped last week's show because over this past weekend, Blizcon happened, and there wasn't a whole lot of big gaming news over last week's week of content. So I really want to wait for BlizzCon to happen because BlizzCon is, Blizzard's been really big in the news, and moving into November, it's their time to shine. And then the following weekend after this, which will be next weekend, will be Worlds of 2019. So we have all that news to cover, some speculation. It's going to be a relatively short show, normal 30 minutes, but there is a lot to cover. So we're going to do things a little bit differently this time around. We're going to start with game releases. At the end of October, there are really two big game releases, that being The Outer Worlds, which is for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. It is supposedly made by the same guys who made Fallout, the original Fallouts. The last one being there's actually two more. October 31st, we had Luigi's Mansion 3, which has been doing surprisingly, I think, really well on the Nintendo Switch. This isn't a huge surprise. Nintendo generally makes really good fucking games. And then last one, which is kind of surprising, is Call of Duty Modern Warfare, which came out on October 25th for the PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Apparently, this game has done tremendously well. They reworked a lot of things that were problematic for Call of Duty. Apparently it has a new engine, so it feels a lot slower than old past Call of Duties. It's a reboot to the Modern Warfare franchise, which is probably when Call of Duty was in its prime with Modern Warfare and Black Ops. That's when I was playing. I feel like that's when everyone was playing. And it really brought back Call of Duty, and it really saved Activision this time around. Apparently there's no microtransactions in it, which was the huge skeptical thing about the game before it came out. But it turns out if you give the fans what they asked for, people will still buy a $60 retail FPS shooter. So this has been very good for Activision. I'm actually kind of happy to see it succeed, because I am a fan of Call of Duty, even though it's kind of died down over the years. But it's good to see it out there. Also, Outer Worlds is an interesting game to me as well, being made by the same people who said Fallout. It feels very Fallout-y from the gameplay that I've seen. And Luigi's Mansion, not really a whole much to say there. It's a Nintendo game. Moving into November, however, we have really two big releases for me. The first one being Death Stranding, which early game reviews have come out for it. And essentially what it's saying is that it's a really interesting story and a really interesting world, being that that concept of a game with is there for Death Stranding, but the gameplay isn't. Basically, seems to be a repetitive fetch quests, meaning bring items from point A to point B. So the memes about you being an Amazon delivery man seem to be true about this game, but it's still, from the reviewers, keep saying that it's an interesting experience because of the world, because of the story, and the story really seems to put an emphasis on connecting people and working together. So I'm a little on the ropes about this game. It's Kojima's first game out of Konami and out of Metal Gear Solid 5, which was a fantastic game. Other small issues that people have been saying about Death Stranding and about the early reviews is the menus are super clunky and the controls are super clunky. So just kind of, it's weird because on the story aspect and the world building is really there, but the gameplay aspect isn't, is what I keep seeing from these initial reviews. It's a really slow gameplay aspect, kind of similar to Red Dead Redemption 2, which also comes out on PC November 5th, which is tomorrow or today at the time of recording this. So, and that's on the Epic Games Store, I believe. But it's kind of similar to Red Dead Redemption 2 gameplay-wise, but doesn't meet like the realism of it yet as well. So it's in a kind of a middle ground of game reviews right now. Again, we're gonna have to wait and see. The last big release, which also is getting a lot of kind of news, I think for me, is Pokemon Sword and Shield. That comes out November 15th, still in a couple more weeks. I enjoy playing Pokemon games. They're fun. The sad part is they're too easy, and I think that Game Freak has been getting a lot of backlash because of this. Apparently, they today or yesterday was a leak about the Pokédex, and we don't know if it's true or not, but they cut a lot of Pokemon from the National Pokédex. Some features that made the game super easy, like shared XP, are just forced upon you. So the community's kind of pissed right now. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but let's just say with Sword and Shield is not leading up to a spectacular launch with how angry the community is. Apparently, like I was reading that like they did a poll on like the most popular Pokemon in Japan, and out of those 100 Pokemon, only 25 will be in this game. So people are kind of pissed about that. And then again, we'll cover these games in later shows because they come out November 15th. Last kind of low-key game release, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order comes out. It's an EA game, so I'm kind of meh about that. So now, let's get into esports. Overwatch League is essentially over. The World Cup and some other BlizzCon events and some CSGO tournaments going on this weekend. But I'm just really going to focus on Worlds for League of Legends, since that's kind of the major esports tournament right now. So we're going to go back in time a little bit to quarterfinals, which in the first game we have IG versus Griffin. IG won 3-1. They moved on to semifinals. Then we had FunPlus versus Fnatic. FunPlus Phoenix won 3-1 versus Fnatic, and they moved on to semifinals. Then we have Splice versus SKT. SKT 3-1 to Splice. SKT moved on to semifinals, and then we had G2 versus Damwon. G2 3-1. They moved on to semifinals. In the semifinal matches, we had FunPlus Phoenix 3-1 to IG. They moved on to finals, and we had G2 SKT. G2 won 3-1. They move on to finals. So this weekend's finals for World 2019 will be FunPlus Phoenix versus G2 Esports, and my money's on G2. That's just straight up. I want G2 to win. I think they deserve it. I think they've redefined what modern League of Legends is in terms of esports. They've been going crazy all year round. Essentially, people were saying that the second split of this year in Europe, they were essentially so good that they were just trolling every game. And they've just been insane. They definitely deserve it. I have yet to watch the full G2 versus SKT games, but I know that it's probably, I think it got reviewed as the most watched esports event in history. It was really a clash of titans between new school and old school, and SKT has reformed, and they used to be the best team in the world. Faker has like 3 championship titles, and he was going for his 4th, and G2, the new dogs in the house, completely pulled the rug from underneath them. So now we move on to the finals. FunPlus, Chinese first seed versus G2, Europeans first seed. And remember that IG, Invictus Gaming, which were FunPlus, which is IG, was essentially the defending world champions, and they lost to FunPlus. So we'll see. I think G2. I want G2 to win. I think there's bias in that for me. One, because I I'm in NA, so I'm usually gonna cheer for NA, even though they're terrible. And if NA doesn't win, then let's go Europe. Generally, you might as well team up for Europe. Plus, as we have seen over recent news, I'm not really a huge fan of China's policies and stuff politically and their teams and Blizzard, which we will segue into very soon. But that's essentially the gist. I think G2 is the stronger team. I think they deserve it. They've been playing insane throughout this year, and even their personalities of their teams just speak, really loudly, which I think, is natural because they're winning. But it's super fun to see them reform, move perks into the bottom lane, grab caps, and just do some crazy ass shit over the past year. It's been super interesting. So now let's move into BlizzCon. So first things first, I want to get the political stuff out of the way. So if you don't know from our last show, Blizzard's been under some heat for craving to the Chinese government and banning a Hearthstone player. This has kind of been, they started off the conference supposedly by giving an apology. It was written apologetically, the president of Blizzard did, to the community about this topic, but it still got protested a lot. There were protesters apparently outside wearing Free Hong Kong shirts, dressing up as Winnie the Pooh in gas masks as well. They were, apparently one red shirt dude said Free Hong Kong in a Q&A session, so it was still there, but apparently it wasn't super loud as it was supposed to be. Which I feel like we get this, which is always true when it comes to these things, is social media kind of blows up about it, and then when it comes to real life, no one really does anything about it or really cares about anything like that. Maybe a few do, but a lot don't. Or maybe they care, but they're just not vocal about it. So I think that's very interesting. But that pretty much covered essentially kind of the Hong Kong stuff. So let's get into the real juicy stuff, which is the games. Now, I'm not particularly a huge Blizzard fan. They haven't made a new game in a really long time, or an original game in a really long time. And yes, you can say Overwatch is original, but I don't really think so. I think it's a modern TF2 clone. But despite all that, they just did some small announcements. It's really, BlizzCon's more of like a fan fest. They started with announcing Descent of Dragons, Hearthstone's newest expansion. So a new Hearthstone expansion. There's a cinematic trailer for it. Descent of Dragons takes place, the fight between the League of Evil and the League of Explorers to the skies above Dragonblight, where the final phase of Raphium's arch villainous plot is underway. So they got new cards, of course. They got new keywords invoked to help him reach his true terrifying power. The League of Evil class will take every opportunity to invoke Galarok. So that's a new keyword. Invoke, introducing side quests to the game. Also, dragons, I guess, are a new race being added. I'm not a huge Hearthstone fan. I'm more into Magic. So I'm not going to cover this too much because I don't have the knowledge to cover this too much. But if you're a Hearthstone fan, just know that there's a new expansion coming, which is always exciting, because even for when I play Magic, when a new expansion comes out and the cards get revealed slowly, it's super exciting. I believe streamers were able to play it early, or some people could play early access. I've been actually really interested personally in trying Hearthstone out, even though I think now it's super hard to get into, just because Magic right now, on the online front, is going through a terrible fucking phase. Like, it is horrendous, and Wizards of the Coast hasn't done anything to try and make it better, and they've just been oblivious to it. So with Hearthstone being an option to go to, and League of Legends card game coming out, Magic, which is the top card game on tabletops, really got to step up their online game, because right now it is fucking horrendous what they're doing, and I can dive more into that in a later show. So what else did they announce? World of Warcraft is getting an expansion, Shadowlands. There's a funny post on the Final Fantasy subreddit. Destiny 2 got their expansion earlier this year, and it was called Shadowkeep. And then Final Fantasy got their expansion earlier this year. It was called Shadowbringers. And now World of Warcraft is hopping on the Shadow bandwagon with Shadowlands. So there's a really cool cinematic trailer out for it. I hope you go and see it. Start reads Sylvanas Windrunner, fallen leader of the Horde, has pierced the veil between Azeroth and the realm of the dead, setting in motion a series of events that threaten and upset the cosmic balance between life and death. Azeroth's heroes will confront the wanderers and horrors of the afterlife as they deal with the consequences of Sylvanas' actions. So I'm actually a low-key WoW fan. I played during the start of Battle for Azeroth, and I couldn't really get into it. But recently, when WoW Classic started coming out, I started to dive more into it. I started to dive into the lore of World of Warcraft and just kind of see what the game was really about. And I actually really enjoyed it. I think it was harder to get into because the community is just so hardcore and they know what they're doing. So as a new player, it's much harder to be introduced to that than, let's say, Final Fantasy, where it's more solo oriented and you're not relying on other people so much. And the biggest problem with World of Warcraft, I think, is because the game is so popular, because it's so old, there's so much information out there that new players get overwhelmed. So it's different compared to the other MMOs like Final Fantasy. I think right now Final Fantasy is the best by far compared to WoW currently. But we will definitely see what this expansion does for it, because they really dropped the ball with Battle for Azeroth. People hated that expansion when it first came out. I think it didn't really click for me either as a new player. And this one looks really interesting. So because I dived into WoW lore a little bit, I know a little bit what's going on with this expansion. So I know that Sylvanas, essentially, she turned 100% evil and abandoned the Horde. She goes and she kills the Lich King and basically creates a portal between, which the Lich King is the damner of the damned, and he essentially creates a portal between the Azeroth, the land of the living, and the land of the dead. So in this expansion, you're going to explore the land of the dead. Cool. Seems actually really fucking interesting. I'm really interested to see that. They kind of explained in the Q&A that Sylvanas has kind of been doing this or making a deal with like the Lich King or something like that since she killed herself and made a deal with the Valkyrie at the end of Wrath of the Lich King storyline, I believe. So of course that's kind of made up, but it is really interesting, and WoW has come a long way. I think one of the best things that they've done for this expansion is they revamped the leveling system. So new players will be able to level a lot better, because I did decide when I got into WoW and tried to give it a try to level my character from basically I leveled a character from like 1 to 30 or something, and then I stopped, and then I got back on that character and tried to level it to 120. So and that level process is such a grind. You don't really get to explore old content that much, kind of breeze through it. So revamping that is really fucking cool. So you get to go to a couple places. You get to go to the Bastions. Those who have lived a life of service are drawn to the Bastion to assume the highest duty of all, carrying souls to the Shadowlands. Amongst the Bastion's gleaming spires and sweeping vistas await challenges to test the mettle of Steadford. You get to go to Ardian Wells, I'm just gonna breeze through these because there's the Maldrix, Revendreth, the Maw, and I believe there's like other features called like Orbos, the Undying City is a new player hub. There's covenants in the game now, so you'll be joining different covenants compared to different zones. That being the Cran, which is in the Bastion, the Venethri, which is in the Revendeth, the Night Fae, which is in Adrianweld, and the Necrolords, which is in the Maxtrolix. And then they'll give you certain rewards like a Sanctum, a Covenant ability, and a Mount. And then there's a new Infinite Dungeon is a new feature they're adding called Towers of the Dam. Again, Final Fantasy already kind of has this Infinite Dungeon called Deep Dungeons, where it's just kind of infinite floors of dungeons and it max out at 99. But I guess that's cool to see that. Level up and leveling's been changed. So from level 1 through 10, players will be their new journey. New characters will be embarked on introductory voyage to learn about everything there is to do in Azeroth, including your first mini dungeon. Then players 10 through 50 pick your era. That's when you get to pick any expansion up to Battles for Azeroth, and then 50 through 60 is when you enter the Shadowlands. So that's really nice, capping it out at 60, which they should have done a fucking long time ago. And you can pre-purchase that now. And there's, of course, different editions. So then they announced Overwatch 2. This is a big one, and it's actually a very interesting one. So Overwatch 2 is in development, and it seems to be a PvP focused game on Overwatch. It is supposed to endorse the Overwatch story, which is really interesting. I think that's one thing Blizzard does really well is building worlds. So it's more PvE focused. But here's the interesting part, because we don't have a whole lot of news of it. There's gameplay of the PvP online if you want to go see it. I know streamers were streaming it the day of BlizzCon, so there's gameplay online if you want to check it out. But here's the interesting thing. All the PvP still applies to Overwatch 1. So if you own Overwatch 1, you just won't have access to the PvE side of things, but you will have access to the PvP side of things. And eventually, I guess the Overwatch 1 is going to merge into Overwatch 2 client, so it's just going to be one game. Jeff Kaplan did an interview explaining how difficult this was to pitch to Activision Blizzard's board, because they're used to direct sequels like Call of Duty. But this is really interesting because this is the first case of a direct sequel that's still kind of the same game. Again, we mentioned this last show, Fortnite just did that, where they rebooted Fortnite and they just Fortnite Chapter 2. It's still Fortnite, but it's the second installment of Fortnite, essentially. And Overwatch is doing the same thing. So this is a weird experience because it's also, Fortnite's free, so they can do that. If League wants to just slap a 2 on League of Legends 2 and redo this map like in preseason, they can do that. You know, no one's paying for League. But with Overwatch 2, you're going to pay for the PvE, and then and also the PvP, and then there's Overwatch 1. But if you're Overwatch 1, you already have access to the PvP, which is kind of the primary focus of Overwatch. So what leads to me, and we have to kind of see it, there's not enough information out there. If I own Overwatch 1, I'm never going to buy 2, because I don't really want, at least for me, I'm not interested in the PvE side of things, unless maybe it's really super fucking fun and good. But generally, people play Overwatch for PvP. So, are people going to buy Overwatch 2? That's we have to wait and see. But it is really interesting, and I'm definitely going to keep my eye on this development of the game, just to see how that works from a business standpoint. Gameplay wise, it's a little bit set in the future, of course. They changed up, I think, some design aspects. Reinhardt has a beard now. Genji's in a hoodie. I know they reworked Hanzo's arrow again. We're now like auto tracks people. I don't know again, like those reworks that they're doing in 2 with that new engine, is that going to be transitioned to Overwatch 1? Or are they going to just remove kind of Overwatch 1 and it just becomes Overwatch 2, but you have the PvP? Again, we don't know. Not enough, information there. But it's really interesting to see what they'll do. Because overall, right now, I think Overwatch 1 is a failure. I think that it was a success at launch, but as most games, it's hard to maintain that momentum. Yes, it's one of the best shooters out there, next to probably CSGO, but the balance of it and all the shields and abilities and kind of what they made it into, it failed, and it just became a failure of a game. Where the esports is kind of overbloated because it has Blizzard and Activision backing it. But overall, the game itself has been a failure. Again, not a whole lot of information on it. We're going to have to wait and see. I'm interested to see where it develops. And last but not least, last year, Blizzard announced Diablo Immortals. And people are super disappointed and super pissed because the Diablo community was waiting for years for the next PC installment of Diablo. And finally this year, they got it. Diablo 4 was announced with a spectacular CGI trailer. Again, this is one of Blizzard's strong suits. They're really good at making those. And it was announced. I know nothing about Diablo, but it looks so interesting. It looks fantastic. Like, I actually would love to play this game and see what it's all about. I've never played a Diablo game, but it looks really interesting. The main antagonist, Lilith the demon, it's really dark, really dark. You could tell from the trailer, and I love dark things. I'm an advocate for it. Some of my favorite stories I've talked about on the show are just really dark told stories, and it just really seems to fill that core dark fantasy. They talked about some of the classes, the barbarian, the sorceress, the druid, and they showed off some gameplay trailers. Again, not a whole lot of details. I'll dive into it a little bit more maybe later once other things are released, but it looked fantastic to me. My only concern as someone who has limited knowledge of Diablo is how does this game operate? Because in this world, we have Path of Fires on Steam for free. And I'm not too sure about this, again, because I'm not a big Diablo fan. I know absolutely zero about the game, but I know that they're kind of in the same genre games as Diablo and Path of Exiles, is that a lot of people, when playing Diablo 3, got really bored, and Path of Exiles is there, being updated, it's free. A lot of people just went and played Path of Exiles. So is Path of Exiles, can it beat Path of Exiles? Because that's probably its main competitor. That's what I'm interested in seeing. But I highly recommend you go and watch all cinematic trailers. Diablo 4 looks really fucking good. I can't wait for more to see come out. I may have to personally look into it more, because this is very light talk about things. But you go on an epic quest with your friends to go kill the demon Lilith, and it's super dark, super fucked up dark, as the trailer seemed to imply. I would love to play that game. I would love to see it. I feel like this year overall has been kind of stale for game releases. We've gotten some good ones at the beginning of the year with Sekiro and Resident Evil 2, and then the rest of the year has just been kind of meh. So that's going to conclude this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Follow us on social media. It's Not a Sport to You. That's our Instagram. If you want to listen to all of our past shows, they're up on our YouTube channel, and you can listen to all of our shows on SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. This has been your host, Salty Waffles, signing off, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful climb.